The FLATMATE by Lynn Barber. September 9th. I am very lucky to have got this flat. It is large and cheap and convenient, and I think I will settle down here. To think I might never have got round to moving from the grotty basement if I hadn't bumped into Simon. I got it on a plate, really. It was all so quick and easy. I must remember to write to Simon and thank him. I wonder why he was in such a hurry to move from such a gorgeous pad. Bloody lucky for me, anyway. There are hundreds of things here. All the wardrobes and cupboards are full. Simon promised to move it out later this week, but some of it goes with the flat. I hope the saucepans and things do, otherwise I won't be able to cook. But I will be glad when he takes his clothes out of my wardrobe, and that stinking basket of dirty linen. I can't really settle until he does, and I so much want to settle. Be homely for a change. Please God, may I never have to share a flat with another girl again ever in my life. September 11th. Simon came today and moved his things out. He also dropped a major bombshell in his quiet way. He had collected lots of things together and packed them in his car. Then he wandered round a bit and said, "Well, that's all my stuff, I think." "What?" I screeched, seeing as how most of the cupboards were still full. "Lots of things go with the flat," he muttered. "Not bloody suits of clothes," and I flung open a wardrobe door to show him. "Ah, yes." He sat down on the bed and looked even more embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Laura, I should have told you before, but I was so anxious to get that lease off my hands." I sat down too, shocked. What ghastly revelations was he going to make now? What was wrong with the flat? Rats? Coloured neighbours? Ceilings falling in? What do you mean? Well, you see, there was someone else living here with me. Tom. Those are his clothes and things. I hope someone from his family will come and take them away soon. But they're all abroad. They live in Thailand. But he's got a cousin somewhere in England, and they wrote and said he'd come. Why can't Tom come? Oh, because he's dead. Dead? I said. Then, how? Suicide. Here. I was away. I stayed away that night. He killed himself here. I couldn't live here any more. Simon slumped down and put his head in his hands. I thought he was crying, and I was desperately embarrassed. I shouldn't have been so beastly to him, especially since he'd given me the flat. Besides, I was rather relieved. It wasn't nearly as bad as rats or falling ceilings. It didn't matter to me what his mouldy old flatmate had done, though I must say my morbid curiosity was champing at the bit, dying to ask more questions. Simon looked so shattered, though, that I couldn't, and so I took him off to his car and watched him drive off. He promised to try and get in touch with the cousin, to collect Tom's belongings, but I said it wasn't urgent. So here I am, in a flat full of corpses clutter. I shall sort it out tomorrow, and put it all in one cupboard. Then I can settle in properly. September 12th. Today I went through the place and emptied all the drawers. Tom had masses of stuff. I put all his clothes in the spare room wardrobe and threw the dirty washing away. One whole chest of drawers is crammed with his papers, and I daren't really burn them, so I have left it as it is and moved it into the spare room too. He seems to have used the spare room as a painting studio. There are masses of brushes and pots of paint, and about 20 canvases, some unfinished still. His paintings are rather good. There is one portrait of a girl who looks like me, but it isn't finished. It never will be, I suppose. Then there is one that might be a self-portrait, a 3/4 head, very handsome, dark hair, dark violent eyes. All the paintings are signed TT. I know what the second T stands for, Traherne. I know that because the listener came today in the mail, addressed to Thomas Traherne. I opened it and read it. It seemed pointless to keep old magazines and newspapers for his cousin to collect. Maybe he subscribed to lots of papers. That might be useful. September 13th. This evening a man rang up. He sounded nice and asked to speak to Tom. I didn't know what to say. I paused for about 100 years and then said, "He isn't here anymore." "Has he moved?" No." Another ghastly long silence. The man was making impatient noises. "Are you a close friend of his?" I asked. "I suppose so, inasmuch as he has any close friends apart from Simon. Is Simon there?" "No, he's moved." "Oh, well, Tom's dead." There, I'd done it. There was a silence, and then a nice voice said very softly, "I suppose he killed himself." "Yes." "It must have been a fortnight ago." I did some mental arithmetic and worked out that it probably was. I had been in the flat 5 days, and Simon had moved out pretty quickly. Christ, so recently. Somehow I had thought of it as months ago, but the man confirmed it by saying, "I spoke to him only the weekend before last." "Oh." Then he rang off very suddenly, and I thought of all the questions I would have liked to have asked him, and felt very annoyed. September 14th. I have found a pile of records. Tom's, I suppose, and the record player works. There was a record actually on the turntable, and I played that first. Caesar Frank's Symphony in D minor. Very romantic and very sad. I have been playing it all evening. Tom seems to have gone in for the heavy romantic stuff. All the records are like that. Brahms, Wagner, Berlioz. And his paintings are too. The books are more varied because there's so many of them, but there's a high proportion of poetry and things like The Sorrows of Young Werther and A Hero of Our Time. I am beginning to build up a clear picture of Tom. Dark, romantic, introspective. I am sure I would have liked him if I had met him. We share the same tastes. I wonder why he killed himself. September 16th. Well, now I have been here a week and discovered that Tom subscribes to The Listener, The Gramophone, Newsweek, and The New Statesman. Not bad at all. Perhaps there will be some monthlies too. If he paid his subscription at the beginning of the year, I shall go on getting them free over 3 months. Isn't that nice? There are lots of other nice things too, and it seems pointless to lock them all away for the possible arrival of this possible cousin. For instance, I found a very gorgeous, genuine Arab kaftan, and I don't see why I shouldn't wear it to a party, just once. Also some mules, about 100 sizes too big, but it saves me having to buy some boring slippers. I put them on to go to the bathroom, and I suddenly thought, stepping into a dead man's shoes, and it was all a bit shuddery for a minute. I must stop this morbid tendency. Last night when I got into bed, it suddenly occurred to me, perhaps Tom died in this bed. That was ghastly, but then I thought of it a different way round. Perhaps Tom slept in this bed, and it gave me almost a cosy feeling. The idea of having a man about the place is somehow reassuring. I slept particularly well last night. September 17th. Damn, damn, damn. Someone has rung up again for Tom, and I didn't ask any of the questions I meant to. This was an older man, and he started off like the other one, asking to speak to Tom. I decided not to beat about the bush this time and said, straight out, "He's dead." He didn't seem at all surprised and asked, "Was it suicide?" As cool as anything. Isn't it odd? Both he and the other man seemed to have expected him to kill himself. Just to rub it in, this man said, "We should have known all along," and then rang off. Damn. If all his bosom pallies were so sure he was going to do himself in, why the hell didn't he do something about it? Then I remembered what the first man had said, inasmuch as he had any close friends except Simon. Simon must know all about it. Shall I phone him and ask him? I feel almost a sisterly interest in Tom now. September 18th. How did he kill himself? This is what is obsessing me now. The other night I thought, perhaps in this bed. That would have to be with pills. And then today, even more grisly, as I was taking my dinner out of the oven, it suddenly hit me. Perhaps he gassed himself here, in my oven. It was so awful, I just threw the food away and didn't eat anything at all. I can't go cooking in someone's death chamber. But now I am being ludicrously melodramatic. He probably didn't gas himself at all. This morning I got all worked up and decided it must have been in the bathroom with a razor, and I spent over an hour looking round for bloodstains. Thank God there weren't any. Not that that proves anything. I am really getting into a state about it. I must stop myself. I must go and see people. I haven't visited any of my friends since I moved in here. I suppose I should invite Stan and Rose to dinner. Oh God, the gas oven again. No one has been in this flat except me and Simon once, since I moved in here. Tom and I live here alone, unvisited. September 19th. I am behaving very oddly. The fact that I know I am behaving oddly proves I am not going mad, anyway. Mad people don't know they're behaving oddly. Besides, I'm perfectly sane. It's just that I'm beginning to feel rather affectionate, possessive almost, towards Tom. I sleep between his sheets. They have the laundry mark, Traherne, and what I am sure is his bed. Last night I said, "Good night, Tom," when I put out the light. Then this morning I went into the spare room and dug out the two canvases, the one that looks like me and the other one that might be a self-portrait of Tom. I hung them on either side of the mantel shelf, and they looked very nice. The one of me isn't a terribly good likeness, though. The eyes are right, and the smile, but the hairstyle's hopeless, and the wrong colour. I could alter it easily. I could just do it longer and darker. Would that be wrong? I don't think so. After all, portraits are meant to look like the person. I will go and mix the paints and do it now. I'm not tired. There, the picture's done, and it looks just like me. I am very pleased with it. I wonder whether the one of Tom is such a good likeness. If only I had a photograph. If only I had a photograph. How ghastly if it wasn't a self-portrait at all. Tom might be short and pink and gingery. No, I can't believe that. It is him, I'm sure. But tomorrow I'm going to go through all his papers and find a photograph. He must have one somewhere. September 20th. Oh, Tom, your letters have upset me dreadfully, and there was no photograph, not one. Your parents in Thailand are monsters. Do you realise that? From your father, typed on embassy paper, signed by his secretary, P.P. Thornton Traherne. Thank you for your letter of the 5th. I'm glad to hear you are fit and well. Your mother and I are also enjoying good health. Do you realise that you are living off your capital? This painting nonsense cannot continue. I look forward to hearing that you have found yourself a decent job. Affectionately, and his mother, drivelling on about her cocktail parties and dinner parties, and how hard it is finding honest servants. And at the end, do you ever see the Crowther's daughter, Sally? I think. She is awfully nice. I do wish you would find yourself a nice girlfriend. How dare she? What about me? But there is also this girl, Anne. She writes to him a lot, mainly boring drivel about her own boring activities and incredibly banal thoughts. How she enjoyed the concert, how Chopin almost moves her to tears, why she loves Keats. What piss! I can just picture her, the prissy, mousy little creep. I can't see what Tom sees in her at all. There's one consolation, anyway. All her letters are over 4 years old. She wrote every week for about 18 months, and then they just stop. I wonder what happened. Anyway, they're not really love letters, though. They're signed. All my love. She never seems to have seen him much, otherwise she wouldn't have had to write so often, and there's nothing romantic. The high point of passion is one in April 1963, where she says, "It was so nice to see you last week after so long. I really did enjoy that evening so much." I wonder what they did. I'm absolutely certain they didn't go to bed together. I'm positive of that. Those are the only letters from a girl. The others are all from relatives and male friends. One called Nigel writes a lot, and it's very odd stuff. His address is Ambleside in the Lake District, and he goes on and on about how glad he is to have got away from the temptations of London, though he keeps saying how much he misses Tom. It is all in a rather unhealthy, self-dramatising vein, and there are bits about religion. He has the nerve to tell Tom he ought to seek the consolation of the church. Puke. Thank God there are no signs that Tom ever did this. Not one Bible among all his books. I think Nigel is a very bad friend for Tom to have. Luckily his letters get more and more infrequent, only 2 in the past year. If any more arrive, I shall write to him to stop pestering Tom. On the whole, the letters are not very interesting at all. What is much more interesting is Tom's own writing. There are some poems, and they seem very good, though I can't really understand them. One, to Shakespeare, goes, "Your dark lady, did you love, as I love?" And then there's just a row of dots. Who did he love? Surely not Anne. I found the dots so irritating that I wrote in my own name, Laura. It sounds better now. Your dark lady, did you love, as I love? Laura. I will keep it under my pillow. I will treasure it. The other thing is his diary, but like everything I find, it is much more frustrating than illuminating. It is written in French. I could curse. Everyone except me speaks French. If only I had listened to Mademoiselle Volney at school. There are some bits I can do. Ce matin je me suis levé à 11 heures means this morning I got up at 11, which isn't exactly devastating news, but there are pages where it goes on, overflowing the printed dates at the top of the page, and the writing gets looser and looser, impossible to read, even if it were in English. You can see those were the bits where he was getting excited, and I can't believe it is all. This morning I got up at 11. Lots of my friends speak French, but could I show them the diary? No, definitely not. It would be an intrusion on Tom's privacy to have a stranger reading his inmost thoughts. But I would give anything to be able to read the last entry, dated September 2nd. After pages of sprawl, the last sentence is clearly written in capitals. Je me suis décidé. I have decided. From that, and from the date, I know for certain that this is his decision to kill himself, and the pages and pages before it must explain his reasons. I am going to learn French. September 26th. All this week I have been working on those pages of his last entry with a French dictionary and a French grammar. I have gone over every line trying to decipher it with a magnifying glass, and then translating the words. But even so, I can only get scattered phrases here and there. The writing is just hopelessly illegible. The name Simon occurs over and over, but I suppose that is only to be expected. Nul espoir, no hope, is written 3 times large at the end of a page. There are no names mentioned apart from Simon's as far as I can make out. It seems clear that Simon was with Tom earlier that same evening. He wrote the last entry, and the evening he committed suicide. So Simon must know what was on his mind. There is nothing else for it. I must talk to Simon. Je me suis décidé. September 27th. I have phoned Simon, and he's agreed to come round tomorrow. I didn't tell him it was to talk about Tom. I made out it was just a social call. After all, we are supposed to be friends, though I must say I really can't stand him. He is always so creepy and hangdog and shifty looking. I know him vaguely because in the bad old days when I thought I ought to have a job, he was in the same office for a while. I think he was sacked in the end, or maybe I just left. I can't remember. I would probably never have seen him again in my life if I hadn't bumped into him in the street that day and mentioned that I was looking for a flat. What luck! Or perhaps it wasn't just luck. I feel I was fated to meet Tom. Otherwise, why should he have painted my portrait and written a poem about me? He knew so much. Of course he must have known about me. I resent Simon's having lived with Tom before me. I don't know how Tom could have stood having that drip around the place. I suppose it was just to help with the rent while he painted and his capital dwindled. Anyway, I shall be nice to Simon for Tom's sake, but when he has given me all the information I want, I won't see him again. I want to forget all about Tom's past when I have cleared up the details. Once we have got the old hang-ups, the letters and the diary out of the way, we can start living properly together in the present. I hate Simon. September 28th. There, I have cleared up all the mess and washed the glasses and dealt with Simon. Now I can forget he ever intruded into our lives. He was a loathsome man, Tom, and we are well rid of him. You even more than me. We won't see him again now. I can't forgive the way he talked about you. No wonder he was reluctant to get onto the subject. I built up to it gradually, and wasted about half an hour on idle chit-chat about all the boring jobs he'd done since leaving that publisher's. He kept saying, "Do you remember so-and-so at the office?" As if I could possibly be interested in any of those deadly deadbeat drips. I thought he would go drivelling on forever, but then there was a pause and I said, "I've hung up 2 of Tom's pictures." "So I see," he said, looking embarrassed in his usual fishy way. "They're good likenesses, aren't they?" He looked puzzled and didn't reply. "It's a good self-portrait of Tom, isn't it? Isn't it?" I said. He turned his head very slowly and looked at it for ages before he muttered, "Yes, it is a good portrait. How he liked to see himself." He shuddered. I noticed as he said it. "Did you know Tom a long time?" I asked. "About 2 years, I suppose. I had only lived with him for 6 months, though." Then he had the nerve to try and change the subject. "Do you have a job, Laura?" "No, I don't. Did Tom have many friends?" No, not really. None at all, in fact. He belonged to some societies, and had plenty of acquaintances, but nobody knew him well." "Didn't you?" I don't think so. Only in the last few weeks. Up to that we hardly spoke to each other, even though we were living together. But gradually I got to know him, and he liked to talk about his paintings." "What did he say about them?" "Oh, nothing much. He thought he was improving, but still not good enough. He wondered if he ought to go to art school." "What did you say?" "I said I thought it would be a good idea. It would get him out of the flat a bit." "Why on earth did you want to get him out of the flat?" Simon looked even more shifty and twisted his horrible white bony hands. "He was going out less and less. In the last few weeks he hadn't been out at all, except to the shops. He stopped going to his societies. He never saw anyone. I thought it would do him good to see other people." "I suppose you mean see some girls, like his bloody mother." Simon looked really amazed and sat upright. "What on earth do you mean, Laura?" I realised then that he might not be too pleased about my reading Tom's letters, not that it was any of his business, so I just muttered, "Oh, nothing." "He didn't have a girlfriend, did he?" "No, he didn't." Simon retreated with his head in his hands again. After a while I got bored with this display of phony sentimentality and said, "How did he do it?" "With a razor. He lay down on the bed and cut his... It was horrible." Simon was crying again. "This bed? My bed?" "Yes, maybe he didn't mean actually to kill himself, but he bled to death. He looked awful. I had to identify the body. He was all twisted, and that mess between his legs." Simon was mumbling into his hands and choking. I could see the tears coming down through his fingers and dripping onto his hideous mohair sweater. What a creep. "Were you here when it happened?" No, not when it happened. I left earlier in the evening. I stayed away that night." "Why?" "I didn't want to see him. We had not been getting on very well. I couldn't stand him going on at me any more, so I spent the night at a friend's." "So you knew he was depressed, and you got bored with being sympathetic, and you walked out on him. You knew he was likely to kill himself. All his friends knew it. You were so goddamn selfish you were prepared to let Tom... You knew he was 100 times better than you, more intelligent, more talented, and you were jealous. He would have been such a great artist, and you were prepared to let him kill himself rather than waste 1 minute of your precious time." My voice rose higher and higher, and I was shouting by the end. Simon was silent for a while, and then with a deep sigh, he took his hands from his face and stood up. His expression was strange, feverish, and he had lost his hangdog look. I felt almost afraid of him at that moment. He stood over me where I was sitting, and started talking very quietly and urgently. "No, Laura, you fool, you bitch. It wasn't like that at all. You're so wrong, so totally wrong, and I'm going to tell you the truth. I intended to keep it secret for Tom's sake, but you deserve to hear the truth. You really deserve to hear it. Tom was a despicable man. Anyone who knew him will tell you that. He whined, he dramatized himself. He sponged off everyone he met. He thought he was Shelley and Van Gogh rolled into one. He believed he was the best goddamn artist in creation, and everyone ought to realize that and fall at his feet." I knew all that when I moved in here, but I felt sorry for him in a way, because I knew he couldn't be too happy in his fool's paradise. There were already signs that his great faith in himself was cracking. He actually asked me whether I thought his paintings were any good. A few months before, he would have hit anyone who said he wasn't Da Vinci. I said I thought they were promising and he must work at them. He began to ask my opinion of everything he did, not just his painting, but his poems and his ghastly self-castigating diary. I had to see everything he did, and I had to see him too. That was when I began to realise. He was forever wandering around the flat naked. He never shut the bathroom door. He always asked me to come in and talk to him when he was in the bath. And then he took to coming into my bedroom when I was undressing. One night he got into bed beside me. He thought I was asleep, but I wasn't, and I said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He sniffled a bit and then he said, "I'm so lonely, so miserable. Let me just lie here, Simon." So I let him stay for a bit, but then I felt his hand on my cock and I threw him out. I was furious and shouted at him. But next day I calmed down a bit and talked to him as kindly as I could, and said I thought he ought to go out more, meet some girls perhaps. He burst into tears, but he said he'd try. A few nights later he came into my room again, wearing his infernal caftan, with his long hair down to his shoulders, and flowers. He had put flowers in his hair, and he stood at the end of my bed and smiled and simpered like a girl, and then he said in a silly put-on girl's voice, "Don't you find me attractive, Simon? Other men do." And he said it as he moved towards me. And I shouted out and hit him and pulled the flowers out of his hair, and said I would leave the next day. Then he broke down and cried, pawing at me with his clammy hands, begging me to stay. He said if I didn't, he would kill himself, and I was frightened he might mean it, so I calmed him down and sat him in the armchair. He began to talk more sensibly, and I promised I would stay, so long as he didn't try anything again, and he agreed and went back to his own room. It was all right the next day, and I think for 4 days after that. It was September 2nd that it happened. I came home from work and found him in my room, lying on the bed, wearing that caftan thing again, but pulled up so that I could see his legs. I had never noticed before, but they were quite hairless, and he started saying things again, begging me, half flirting like a woman, half pleading. He kept saying, "Come to bed, darling. Think of me as a woman. I'll look after you." It was obscene. It was foul. And then when I didn't come, he got up and started following me around the room, pawing me, clinging to me, crawling around on the floor after me. Then I shouted at him. I can't remember what I said. I shouted and went on at him, and then I left the flat. Later that night, he took the razor and killed himself. It was the window cleaner who found him the following afternoon. So that was Simon's story. He put his head in his hands again when he had finished. I was so furious, Tom, you can imagine, so wrought up with hatred for him. His lies, his horrible tissue of lying self-justifications, and I looked at his repulsive bony body there, and he had had the nerve to pretend you found him attractive, flattering himself. And my anger just boiled and boiled inside me, and I couldn't say anything because I was so furious. But suddenly I saw what I must do, and everything was clear and sensible. I went into the kitchen and found the carving knife and whetted it in the machine. Then I went back into the room with it, and Simon looked up at me, that phony expression of what? Sympathy, apology, on his ugly face, and I walked right up to him, and he didn't see the knife, not until the last moment. Not until I raised it above my head and brought it down as hard as I could into his shoulders. But it was difficult to do, much more difficult than it should have been. He put his arms up to protect himself, and even when I got the knife in, I had to pull it out again, and it was stiff to do it again and again and again. And he started making noises, not real screams, but nasty bubbling noises. And we kept falling over onto the bed, and it was so messy. I got his blood on my dress. It must have been half an hour at least before I could get him finally to shut up, to stop the filth that was coming out of his mouth, stop his blabbering. So I was very tired, physically exhausted, by the time he was lying still, and then I had to take his trousers off and his underpants before I could really finish it. That'll teach him to invent lies about you. So I hope you appreciate it properly, Tom, what I've done for you. I hope you are truly grateful, I had to avenge your death and stop him telling those lies about you, desecrating you. He murdered you with his dirty-mouthed insinuations, and so I murdered him. I am coming to bed now, Tom, our bed. I am coming to lie beside you. Wait for me, Tom.